Yeah, hi everyone. Let us introduce our next speaker, Mr. Kumar Bagrodia. Mr. Kumar Bagrodia is the founder of Neuroleap, India's leading applied neuroscience company. Neuroleap leverages brain-computer interface technology to understand the brain and make it work at optimal potential. Often known as India's brain enhancer, Kumar is a member of National Startup Council of C2 and also a member of Apex Council of India Innovation Initiative by the Government of India. He has delivered keynotes and has been invited for talks in leading national and international podiums, including the G20 summits, UN Environmental Programme, World National Congress, World Brain Congress, to name a few. He was invited by Honorable Prime President of India to his official residence in 2017 and was invited again in March 2018 to speak on innovation. He was also a speaker at Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in London in 2018 and was also an invitee to the palace by His Royal Highness Prince of Wales. He is an alumnus of University of Oxford and is a country champion and ambassador for Oxford Business Alumni in India. Over to you, sir.
Um, Thank you for the very kind introduction, Sandeep. Am I audible clearly?
Yes, sir. You are audible.
To all the organizers, Professor Chakravarti, and everyone listening in, thank you for inviting me on a Sunday morning for this talk. I must confess, I don't have the intellectual depth to even present anything like I'm sure most of the other knowledgeable speakers have. But I would just like to start by stating that why is it that we should be looking at a tech interface and moving away from human interface when it comes to health and wellness, especially mental health and wellness. Let's look at mental health and wellness in India. Over the decades, there was a time when we would rely on skill. So the skill of the Vaidya, the skill of the physician, right? Because the physician or the Vaidya didn't have access to any other technological way to get data. So his way of getting data, which was a skilled method, was to check your nadi, your pulse. But that was a acquired skill over decades, which meant that we didn't have too many of those around. And it was difficult to distinguish between a real Nadi Vaidya vis-a-vis a charlatan or a quack. All of the last 5 to 7 decades has been a transition from moving away from skill, which was human to human, to data. So whether it is the weighing scale to find out whether you're putting on weight or losing weight, or a thermometer to check how high a fever do you have. It's no longer enough to just call a doctor and say, hey, my son has high fever. What is high? And how do you know it's fever? How do you know that your body is not too cold and his is slightly warmer? Or it is a X-ray, or as the illustrious speaker just before me was talking about, brain MRIs, CTs, EEG, so on and so forth. Whether we agree or not, whether we realize or not, our health and well-being is already determined by data. It is no longer possible, and I'm speaking especially for mental health, it is no longer possible or reasonable to expect that one human to another human will be able to specifically and objectively understand what is going on with the mental health situation of the other person, however experienced you are. Why? As we all know, in computational neuroscience, there's a department that the brain is a far too complex organ for another human to just understand by looking at basic psychometric tools and tests, or having a psychological analysis alone. Because in psychology, a lot of the signals you're picking up are verbal, are self-disclosed. They are prone to severe amounts of bias by the respondent. So it has its limitations. It has its uses, certainly, but it has severe limitations. Coming back to the need for data, there was a time when we were expected to follow a certain lifestyle. So I don't mean, let's say, 10 or 20 years ago, but maybe a little bit before that, where it was assumed that you would be sleeping on time, waking up on time, doing some amount of physical activity, which not necessarily requires you to drive down to a gymnasium. It could be just running, or it could be playing a sport, or doing some yoga or pranayam, or whatever it is, and generally having a good diet, good exercise, and a good, healthy, balanced lifestyle. People who followed that traditionally didn't land up with too severe problems in terms of mental health or in terms of mental performance. Unless there was some sort of history, let's say in the family, or there was a untoward incident that had happened in the person's life, some sort of trauma, whether physical, emotional, directly to the brain, so on and so forth. What has happened over the last few decades? We have been continuously and methodically brainwashed to believe that if you want to have better mental health, yes, the human to human interface or the human to human connection has limitations, and we've been led to believe that the answer is chemicals, which we call meds. The United States is still paying the price for 5 to 6 decades of that brainwashing being done to that population. Between 25 to 30% of that population is on opioids or mental health drugs. It's a $90 billion industry, just the medication alone. Leave alone, counseling and therapy of all sorts.
Sir,
My
sorry
submission,
to
there is little evidence that chemicals or psychiatric drugs have been able to have any curative effect on any mental health disorders. The research is very clear. Yes, there is a massive lobby which is still functioning, and unfortunately, that is the way India is going to. But I believe that given that we all agree now that a lot of our health is based on data from our biology, from our neurobiology, whether it is imaging data, whether it is brainwave data of any kind, but it is data nonetheless, then our mental health and wellness is an engineering problem to solve. And in this forum, it is an engineering problem to solve using computational neuroscience data. Once we believe that, yes, the chemical imbalance theory is not really playing out the way we were expected to believe in the last 4 or 5 decades, we have to look elsewhere for solutions. There has been a massive move, if I can call it, in the global north in terms of the research bias. When it comes to your mental health well-being, in India, we are expected and we are following all those global psychological research bases, models, and treatment methods, which have very little, I would say, basis in the Indian context. Why just the Indian context? I think India is so diverse in our own specific regional context. I believe there is tremendous amounts of need to gather data on these specific concepts in India. Secondly, how do we look at leveraging the ancient knowledge and the ancient way of life, or the traditional way of life that our country was used to living? But with modernization, with the lobbying and ability of big pharma to be able to push us away from lifestyle related methods, from non-medication related methods, and non-long-term solution methods to say, yes, you've got a headache, just take a pill, right? You're not able to pay attention, here's a pill. You're not happy, you're depressed, well, here's a pill. And all of these pills are exacerbating the problem. But there has to be a way where we can go back and say, what was the neuroscientific basis for doing arti or puja or chanting at a certain rhythm, at a certain pace, again and again, day in and day after? There were neuroscience benefits to it. As the Western world is waking up and doing far more research than what we are doing in India on the basis of effects of meditation, dhyan, pranayama, yoga, I think it's incumbent on us to be able to take that mantle and say, yes, all of these things were beneficial, and the data has to prove it. For all these years, India has had very little incidence of severe mental health, hospitalization, or disorders. The incidence is increasing in the last 40, 50 years. So, what were we doing before that? And how can we form fit this through research and prove it to our next generation that if you are able to do these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 things in your daily routine and lifestyle, you will have better mental health and wellness. Let's use technology to make you more aware. The moment we were able to give a thermometer or a blood pressure monitor or a glucometer or a weighing scale or a Fitbit watch or a oximeter in the hands of a household, we empowered them with data to be able to take better decisions and better manage their health. No, these are not medical technologies in the sense. There is no medicine involved. These are lifestyle technologies. They are meant to help you manage your lifestyle better and hence your health, mental health, wellness, and performance better. We should be in a position then to give data-driven insights to our population to say, there is now research to show that if you are able to go to bed early, wake up early, these are the benefits you will get. And these are the tools you can use at home to manage how you can manage your sleep and get the benefits, how you can manage your gut and get the benefits. So my provocation, honestly, is that we are gone beyond the time where, at least for mental health and wellness, we have to rely on external chemicals alone. It can be natural based, but more importantly, we are seeing increasingly an era moving from just human to human interface, which has its value, psychological counseling, etc., but very limited today. There are other issues there. You have a generational gap in psychology. Like I said, you have a research bias. It's the global north in terms. Today, we have to rely on technology. I will now, take questions if there are any.